Good to see everyone here. We are so excited to be coming together as a community, and we are going to be talking type remedies. We've been talking about this a little bit. I think it's been kind of coming up I've seen it in a few other places, sort of the idea of, are there type remedies? Do you know your type remedy? Are you always the same type remedy? There's a lot of questions, a lot of ideas, a lot of theories, and we thought this would be a really good opportunity to come together and talk about them. So Ruth and Rochana, we are here, and we are joined with this wonderful group of people, and we are really excited to be starting. Do you want to start with a little bit of the housekeeping stuff so that people will know kind of how we're going to try to run this?
Yeah, glad to. We're basically just going to kick off the conversation with the three of us, just very briefly, and then open it up to all of you. And the way you can participate in one of two ways. You can either type a question or comment in the chat, and feel free to do that at any point. Or if you would like to have the mic, then as we've got all of you on mute to keep the recording clean, you can click on the reactions button on Zoom and then raise your hand. There's a button that says raise your hand, and then one of us will call on you to give your comment or question. And you'll just need to remember to unmute your mic before speaking, and then mute when you're done again.
Yeah, and I would like to start off by just saying a few things and sharing a few thoughts, but also, first of all, to let you know that I may not be able to stay for the whole call. We're having a medical issue in the family that I'm having to attend with urgency. So I'm really sorry about that, and even sorry for me perhaps not being in one of my very best days due to this. But one of the things that I wanted to comment on is that just this last Saturday, I was invited yet again to translate Julian Barnard, and he was giving a lecture to this audience in Brazil of flower essence practitioners. And one of the big themes of the conversation was type remedies. His lecture was about water violet and then rock rose. And as the conversation went on, this whole issue and the questions about type remedies were all coming up. So I felt, whoa, this subject that we chose is really in the air, and we're all really excited to be talking about this. And so one of the things that he kind of brought up was that when Bach made Rock Rose, which was the 12th, that was when he started addressing life situations, patterns of response, etc., archetypal patterns of life experience, but not necessarily that pure description of the type. And so it was on the 12th remedy that transition may have began. And so we're off to this conversation, all of us today, to see what your thoughts, what your questions have been, what has been your experience in your practice. And I'll soon share a little bit about what has been my experience in my practice around type remedies. But back to Kathleen.
Right. I think whenever I'm working with a client, I'm always thinking in terms of, can I identify a type? Can I, it's sort of my first sorting, to kind of go through and look at what's being presented, what sort of personality are we looking at? And is there one of these, of the 12 healers, or even of the 19, that make a lot of sense? Does this picture fit? And having had the experience of being a really good friend with a homeopath, and we were, for years, we would trade sessions back and forth. And so I had a good experience of working with somebody who was looking for a constitutional. And so I think that Bach, having been a homeopath for a while, I think his mind was thinking along those lines. And so my mind does think along those lines, but I don't think that there's a complete, like a stamp of like, this is your type and you'll never be anything different. Do you think about that when you're working with a client?
Well, I extend the question for everyone, and please add your thoughts in the chat. Do you think like that when you're working with a client? Please, jot your thoughts down. As for me and my almost 35-year practice now, I have to say that mostly because my initial education, even though it was the Bach remedies, but soon the California essences came in as part of my training, and I had this expanded palette of essences, working with the Alaskan essences very soon after as well. It's almost like, for me in my practice, the looking towards a type remedy is something that stays in the back of my mind when I'm working with a client. And so initially I'm looking at what they need, and I'm thinking of the patterns and what will really support them. And in parallel, I'm also looking for a type remedy, but not so much with the expectation that that is going to become clear anytime soon. And yet, as the journey unfolds in the work with a client, and this maybe can help answer the question, can you define type? So in answer to this question, let's say that in flower essence therapy, we often think that each plant embodies and expresses an archetypal type of expression. It's kind of a unique archetypal gesture, let's say, or signature is probably the best word. And that archetypal signature can be looked at as being something that an individual or a human may have a lot in common as far as their soul journey, as far as the typical traits of their ways of being, as far as the journey that they're walking as a soul in this life. And so sometimes we see a real parallel between that archetypal gesture and signature of a plant and that individual soul. And when we see that resonance and that correspondence, that's yet another thing. Does the person need to take this remedy right when we identify that or not? And that's one of the things that even in Julian's lecture this last Saturday was being asked, like, if you really identify with the type remedy, do you really need to take it? And how often would you take it? That is something for which there isn't kind of a final question. But so back to my practice, I usually stay with that question in the back of my mind. And I will sometimes come to a perception of a type remedy for a client. And when that comes, that will usually go into the formula that they will take. But it's also something that we will talk about as them having that remedy as a companion, as an ally, as a plant ally that they will be in conversation with as they go through their journey. But I'm sure other practitioners have different ways of seeing this. And there are also archetypal patterns that are very pronounced and happening and outpictured in the person's life journey, but they may not be necessarily their type remedy. It might be the archetypal pattern of their soul journey during a period of time, but not necessarily a type remedy for that individual in terms of their essence. Does that make sense?
There's a lot in there. We could unpack
Yeah.
that for a long time. The thing that I heard and would respond to is that aspect of looking for a matching kind of pattern. You know, when you see that expression coming up, is there a match in some of these qualities that are coming forward in this client's life, in this experience, right in this moment? Like, is there something that's a good match? And I love how you're talking about that. You don't usually see it right away. It usually takes some time to start to see the picture clearly. I would feel that that's very true for me. And then also looking for that matching pattern. Sometimes it's just like one little something that somebody might say, or one little part of it, and then boom, it all comes into focus, and you see, this would be a really good ally for someone. And I certainly find that when I'm starting to get that idea and that plant starting to come forward, I might start bringing that plant into the conversation. Like, for instance, a lot of times I'm working with somebody who's, this has come up a couple times, so I'm amalgamating people here. Somebody who's overloaded, taking care of a lot of people, managing a lot of situations, a work-life balance. It's like, what balance? Doing all those things. And I'll start bringing oak into the conversation and just talking about how, oak's qualities, how oak supports and feeds and nourishes a whole ecosystem, and talking about how the positive qualities of oak are to share responsibility, are to get help from others. That would be one way that I would bring this concept of type into the conversation.
Yeah, and I would bring this as well in exactly the same way, but that would not necessarily lead into saying, I think this is really a constitutional remedy for you. One that is kind of a long-term companion that really expresses your soul signature and the potential of flourishing for your soul signature. It may be or not, right? So archetypal pattern or type remedy, that's really the theme of this conversation today, because we as fluorescence practitioners kind of dance in between working in this way or working in that way, and looking for the patterns.
And isn't that distinction between seeing this concept as a model, rather than as an absolute structure that we have to fit into somehow? It's a lens. It's a way of seeing things. Like, does this person fit this type more than this type? But it doesn't mean they are that type. It doesn't, it means that they are maybe experiencing that right now, or that it's a fit right now, but not that you permanently emblazon it on them as a permanent, never to be changed, never to be evolved process. I think that it's just good to not calcify things, right?
Very much so. And at the same time, there's always this potential of further flourishing that each plant holds, and we're always learning with the plant and finding qualities and expression that it has that go beyond what we knew before. And so having a type remedy doesn't mean that you're locked into something, because we're always learning infinitely with each one of the plants. However, what's your experience? Who would like to bring your voice into the room about this theme, if you have a practice in which you've been dealing with this issue of type remedy or not? Yes, Louis,
Ruth, I'll start. I'll start off and
Okay,
then I'll
great.
help
Yes.
manage the
Yeah.
hands up. But everybody go ahead and put your hands up who would like to say something. But I find the concept of personality types really fascinating, and I always have, because I'm one of those people who am hard to pin down. I always test different on all the different personality tests, even the it'll go back and forth between INFP and INFJ depending on when I take it, and when I do the Ayurvedic dosha quizzes, that will vary a lot as well. And so I definitely like the idea of having different parts of ourselves and this multiple aspects of personality types, and that different parts of yourselves can be louder than others at certain parts of your life. And that also makes a lot of sense when you look at constitution, your Ayurvedic constitution. They say look at how you were when you were in your 20s or younger, when you were younger, versus to get your core constitution, and then how you are today if you're older is where they're imbalance, where it can go, and that you can see imbalances that way. So I kind of look at if a type does emerge, which it really doesn't always, or doesn't even very often. If it does emerge through working with a client, I kind of like to look at it that way. I wouldn't then think, okay, that person should get that corresponding remedy in every formula, only if it's imbalanced. And my example is I've always gravitated to the water violet as a type in the Bach system of the 12 healers. And yet that doesn't come out very often. It comes out more when I'm ill and I'm not feeling well. But in my day-to-day, it doesn't come out as often. Yet I have also a very strong vervain type, and that comes out much more in my, if I'm out in the world and doing work and, in the workplace and that kind of thing. So it can definitely be something that is very, variable depending on the situation and depending on where someone is in their life and where the imbalance is. So whether it's a type or a past or a trauma or a passing situation, it's always working with trying to get to balance. And that's the way I see it.
Thanks, Ro. That's a really great view on it. Appreciate it. Loie, how about?
Hey there. Can you hear me okay? Great. Thanks, Ro. That was really great. Like thinking of the parts of the self and the multitude. I've worked with clients for many years and myself for many years, so kind of playing with this idea over a long period of time and seeing what works. And part of it, like I look at Dr. Bach's writings and how he talked about, like if you give the type remedy, all of these different surface things will be taken care of. And sometimes somebody will come to us and we'll see all these surface things and we'll treat those, and the type like isn't showing itself. I like to use the birth chart, and the same as kind of talking about type remedies, like we're not just one astrological sign, right? We have a sun sign, but then there are these other parts of ourselves. One of my teachers who recently wrote a book about the correspondences of the Bach flowers and astrology. He's a homeopath too and has worked for decades and lots of clinical experience. So I look at those correspondences based on his clinical experience, based on mine, and I see, like I might forget for a period of time to work with a type remedy with someone, and then I'll see like these decompensations. I'll start to see these things, these difficulties happen, and then it'll be like, oh right, coming back to whatever sun, moon, rising, or something else that might be going on, but kind of those core pillars of both their chart and type really consistently in myself and in clients brings like it brings them back to the path that they're, to more ease in their path. So, yeah. And then the other thing about it is, what I think that trauma is really common, and that each person responds in their personality's way to it. So we might see trauma, and then using type remedies can help them bring into balance how they're dealing with it. I guess that's my experience.
So you see frequently the type remedy response out pictured in the pattern identified in the type remedy. That's a really interesting take. Thank you.
I missed what you said. I didn't understand.
That you observe that when people are in their trauma response, they are also kind of expressing the pattern of the type remedy.
Right, in the imbalanced way. Like the more trauma knocks us off, disorganizes our system, the more the imbalances of the type might show themselves. And even through like the 7 helpers and the last 19 of the Bach system, or other, depending on the type of trauma, maybe there's a personality, like a water violet personality who has a father trauma. And so there's like water violet is a main one, and maybe sunflower, baby blue eyes is a main one. And like those two might continue to be like an issue type and a personality type together, along with whatever else is going on along the way. And the formula shifts and changes with kind of some core. That's kind of how I've been working, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. And it's great to have this parallel. I also work with the chart, and I also work with voice dialogue. And I can see in the chart the different parts and the remedies for them as well. Yeah, great. Thank you. So Judith.
First, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to this. I haven't studied the Bach flower remedies, really. I've used them for a long time in my own life, just a few of them. But I studied with David Dalton, so I'm more familiar with Delta Gardens essences, and that's what I've used in my practice primarily. I'm really interested at this point. I've been in practice for about 10 years to learn more about the Bach flower remedies and to start incorporating them. But I just wanted to comment on when I first started seeing clients, it was mostly for Lyme disease, which, as many of you might know, David has done a lot of work with that. And they came pretty quickly because we have a lot of need where I live. So I really didn't know that much about the essences. I had finished the training. I knew a lot about David's approach and how he works. But what was really sort of freeing to me was to just be dowsing, using my pendulum to find the essences, whatever that frequency was that the client needed, and not even worrying about understanding what the flower essence was going to do. And as I went on and then learned more about the essences, and I was listening to people's talk, it often didn't sync up with the remedy that was being called for. And I started feeling like people might have life experiences where their loved ones or family, their friends, their work situation have told them that they are certain things, and they've started the dialogue saying that, I'm very anxious, or I'm nervous, or I'm type A, or I'm, my family says. And sometimes it seems like the essences that were calling forth and saying, pick me, I'm the one, didn't really make sense initially to me. And then later I would see how they worked in combination. So I just wanted to offer that up. It's, we can have our own ideas, but the powers that be outside of what we understand. And it kind of goes to what Ruth was talking about, that there's so much about these essences that we don't know. We know some things about them. And I don't know if Bach would say that or not, but that's been my experience, where we think of, in David's essences, like Missouri as being something for people who worry or people who don't have a lot of confidence. And yet those are just things we've identified. There could be 100 other things that that flower, Missouri primrose, brings to someone's field, because just like our bodies are unique biologically and they react to vitamins and minerals and foods differently, same with the essences. So sometimes I don't try to figure it out. I just let the essences do their thing and they figure it out for me. That's all. But it's great to be here, and thank you again for the invitation.
Thanks. Glad you were here. I that little piece what you just mentioned of essences that we've been working with and have known for longer maybe become more expanded over time, and our understanding of them becomes more expanded over time. And I think that's why I tend to always kind of go back to these original Bach essences, because they have been used by so many people for so long that we have a really, well, maybe not a full picture, but a fuller picture of some of the possibilities and qualities that they offer. So, Eliel?
Thank you for pronouncing my name right. I have more of a question. I've stayed away from trait psychology and type remedies because my question is on evolution. And I watch people who appear to be fixed in one dynamic or the other, but as they go deeper and release blockages and start to heal, they might switch to something else. So when I work with a client, I'm looking in the moment to see what emotions are up. When they're in person or remotely, I'm also looking at their body language to see the lines of tension. And I will recommend remedies based on ones that I think will help. However, when they're in person, there's a whole series of reactive remedies in the Bach flowers. And when they're in person and about to get on the table for some somatic work, I tend to offer them a remedy that is reactive to bring the emotion to the surface so it can be dissipated and worked with. And so that's all. The question is on if I am assigning somebody a type, then to my mind, I'm sort of fixing them in that and not allowing them to move outside the box of a type remedy. So I'm wondering if anybody else had that dilemma.
Can I add a little thought on that?
Absolutely.
One of the reasons I love studying botanical families is that I can be led towards one of the essences, like agrimony. Let's just throw agrimony in the room. And then I could be thinking, but it's not quite exactly the right fit. What other family members in the Rosaceae might be a closer fit? And also just the concept that we think that these plants are fixed, and they're not. They are evolving along with us, and we are all participating in this dance of evolution. So I think the plants show up for us in an evolved state. They meet us where we are, and they may be working with this one person with this set of issues, and then they can be responding to something much further down. I hate to linearize an evolutionary, but it is, we're all working on different areas at different times, and I think the plants can completely meet us there.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. The way that I might choose an essence is somebody might be on the table and an essence will actually speak for them. Very often I will go to the flower essence repertory if I have either an emotion or a particular flower in mind, and take a look at the other ones in the same category, and then either douse or listen or meditate. And that's how I would develop a formula or a single flower that I'll recommend.
Thanks for sharing that. Deborah, do you want to pop in next? We need you to unmute. Yeah, beautiful. You're still muted, Deborah.
Okay, there, that should do it. Great. I've been working with the flower remedies, I guess, since about the 1985 or so. And so my pathway of working with them has changed a lot. And during that time, I have a degree in psych, and so I do a lot. I work with clients on kind of a broad spectrum, and I do a lot with neurolinguistic programming, where I do different aspects, that we try to get a person to shift in their consciousness. So in these years, I've done a variety of those things, and most of my sessions are 90 minutes, and I work with that. And after listening and everything else, I get to the point where we do the remedies. And I have found in probably the last 10 years, as I get the person involved, I'll have an idea, of course, and then I have my books out there, the Fluorescent Society books, and then the shorter guide. I like that. So I like the people to be proactive. But more and more, I just kind of narrow it down. They will narrow it down. And then I have them hold it. And at first, people would, it's just like a basic muscle testing, but I'm in a very conservative part of the country. And at first, people would like, well, that doesn't make any sense. But I've noticed in maybe the last 5 years, and when I just say, well, here, hold it, it may not have any vibration in your hand, but just kind of experience what comes up. And I notice now that younger people, 40 and younger, they just go right to it. They don't have to think. They just go right to maybe this one and that one, and then they'll put all the pieces together. And I think that that's really interesting because they don't have this, well, how does it work? Or what else could we do? How could I just hold something, and how would that make any sense? So that's what I've been doing. I've been integrating that in with the client sessions, and that's usually the last piece. And it's been working really, really well. So for me, that's been a shift.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. There is something really cool about when you're able to work with somebody in person, handing them the essence and seeing the response, because it can be so dramatic.
Right. Yeah, I'm blessed because I like to do people not over the phone, and I just like to have them here, come to the farm. So I'm kind of picky that way.
It's a lovely thing if you can do it. Thank you for sharing that experience. And Natalie, perhaps you want to pop in next?
Hi, everyone. I apologize ahead of time. I have a toddler right here, so anything that happens, I'm sorry. So the way I've been working with the 12 healers since I'm new to using flower essences and using it with my healing clients, I was trying to be practical, but I also wanted the data. And since I didn't know the flowers independently yet, like memorized and really know all of them, I created a Google form. So I took one of the FES forms that goes into the 12 healers, and then on the Google form I put the 12 healers, I put the description, the affirmation, the image of the photo, and then I said, how much does this resonate with you? Like a lot, the scale was like 5 different levels, to very much or moderately or not very much. And then I would have them fill that out before we would do our session. And that kind of gave me an idea of like where they were leaning as far as a type. It's been like a year since I've seen and since I've used the form. But what stood out to me was when across all of the flowers, they were like in the middle for all of the types. So that's what was surprising to me. There, I was like, okay, well, what do I do with this? Like they're, either they're just not in tune with their inner landscape yet, and so they're not really sure. And I think that was more or less the theme, but it was just interesting that they're like, oh, I'm not sure. I don't resonate with any of these. I don't know. And so that's how I was trying to start to identify it without having like the full strong background in it yet. And I found it helpful. It was like a starting point for me to learn with them.
I wanted to make a point around this. if that's okay, because one of the things that I have found in these years studying the essences, having began with the Bach remedies, but then having the other essences come very soon after, is that with the Bach floral essences, the literature has become so full of descriptions related to the personality and so distant from the plant. And it's been mostly with Julian Barnard's work, in which, and of course, if you haven't yet done the Bach flower learning that we have in our platform, please go for it, because there's so much there. Julian Barnard brought to us so much more of the awareness of the gesture of the plant. And so one of the things that I have found is that beyond just talking about these behaviors and is this the way you do it, or do you have these personality traits, when we also introduce some description of the plant and some description of how that plant is related to that environment and how that plant evolves through the seasons and its gestures, that usually strikes more of a soul chord in people. And I can see Louis nodding to that, because that makes all the difference. If we stay too much on the personality, I think we stay too much in what humans have put upon these essences. So I find that it helps us so much when we go more like back to studying the plants and really seeing the gesture of the plant, and then bring the two together. So.
And one thing that I've done from time to time when it seemed like the right thing to do is to just talk to them and ask them what their favorite tree is. You know, just have a conversation. And so this has been, I've seen it happen fairly dramatically with younger people. Like I had a circumstance where it was a boy who was maybe 12, and they don't tend to be great on the phone. So I was talking to mom first a little bit, and then, you know, got him on the phone, and I was really having an interesting time trying to get any kind of, you know, a little bit of insight onto what he might like. And I asked him that question. He knew right away what his favorite tree was. I'm like, yeah, okay. And then I could start talking to him about that tree and about what that tree was about. And then he was fully on board. And so sometimes that's a nice opening gambit to see where you can go, because people know on some deep level what really feels like home to them, what feels really perfect for them. So, and Natalie, that's an interesting idea about asking what their resonance is. And almost when you have somebody who's 5 to everything, or kind of middle of the road to everything, that sounds almost like a Serato to me.
Now, Patsy, you had your hand up. Would you? Yes. All right. You can unmute.
This is a pretty broad, I had many things to say, but the one thing was that Paralandra Essences years ago, I mean, like a decade or more, removed their descriptions from their essences, believing more in the vibrational nature and just your intuitive nature to, without a human's description of what that essence is for, to choose the ones that can balance your system beyond. So, and I too started with David back in the 90s, and have always been more drawn to that. That's why I don't study them, although I think I actually prefer the descriptions, because it does help me to see subjects or understand things. But there is a level of where it is just very intuitive, or it can be. But yes, I think you can bring in knowledge too. Okay, and the only other thing is that Julian Barnard, I saw him in a 2010 conference say there is no vibration in the essences, it's merely information. Rocked my world. I haven't come back yet. And we're just up there talking, goes, there's no energy in these things, it's just information. So I'll have to find it for you. It's out on his website, and it's under how to make flower essences. And that was my understanding. He goes, no, there's no, that I swear I heard that. So anyway, but I kind of believe there's a vibration or something. So yeah,
I can respond to that, because he has a whole book called Patterns of Water,
Mhm.
And what he means is not that there's no life force
Okay.
in the essence.
Right.
He actually has another previous book that's called Patterns of Life Force. So definitely there is life
Right.
force
Okay. Right.
imprinted in the water, but it's just a matter of words
Okay.
that he's calling, when you place the plant in the sun or in the boiling method, which he also does,
Right.
information from the whole journey of that species of plant
Maybe that's what yeah. Okay.
becomes imprinted there. So it's like there's wisdom there. It's information in the form of wisdom, and it doesn't mean at all that he's not honoring the fact that there
Right.
are life force qualities in that. In fact, he does. And even if you watch one of his lectures in which he's showing what's happening in the water, and he goes into minute, like super close up in this process of the transfer into the water of whatever the plant is giving to the water. I think it's mostly a matter of using technical words, and he has chosen to use information
Okay. Thank you.
rather than vibrational. So it's been a choice of
Okay.
words.
Semantics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
semantics.
you. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
So maybe Alexandria, who hasn't spoken yet, and then we can bring Ailey again. Yeah.
Thank you, Ruth. I don't have a lot of experience doing type with Bach, but one question that I'm very fascinated by this topic because I just love typing in general. But one question that often comes up for me is typing and just where people live and their different like ancestral backgrounds and how that then weaves in. I don't know. That's just kind of like something that comes to me often around like, just their different ancestral lineages. I don't know if anyone, Ruth or Kathleen or Ro, if you want to speak to that, but that's something that comes up. I'm always kind of thinking, I'm half Mexican, half Danish. And so I'm always thinking about just, my last name is Sharappa, but it used to be Miller and used to be Alex Miller. So when I'd show up, people would think like a white guy and they're like, why is this Latina girl? So I can move, like morph and shift in different circles very easily. And depending on the year, like how brown I am in the summer and then how white I can get in the winter. And so I'm always thinking about like my own lineage and just where I go, how people view me differently. And when I come to plants, there's something about, I love Bach essences, but then there's also this part of me that feels like the typing and ancestral lineage, like I don't know a lot of plants from Mexico and like, what would that look like? Would I feel super drawn to that? And is my type in Mexico? Is it cacao? Like, so that's something that comes up for me. I don't know.
Do you mean, Alexandria, that the archetypal expression is what draws you, and then there's, some kind of perhaps cultural substance to these archetypal expressions that might be meaningful, or ecosystem? Is that what you're
Almost feeling like, I don't know, it kind of makes me feel connected to like I think part of the reason why we're here in this human experience and this soul experience is to step into like our magical inheritance. And I feel like sometimes that can often be done in a more human way through our blood lineage to then step into our soul lineage and our soul magical inheritance, whatever that is. And so I feel like sometimes I don't know if I feel more drawn to certain plants for certain reasons, or if there's a typing, and if I'm only using the Bach to type, and then I'm like, can you use any flower to type? And how does that work? And Yeah, I love Bach because I'm new to working with Bach, and I've worked with Bach for over the past 3 years, and I find I think he's a genius. I think his system is so beautiful, and he was such like a cutting edge trailblazer, and his story is so amazing. And but I'm also like I'm also someone who doesn't like to like limit myself, and so just thinking of like how else that works when it comes to the typing for someone, especially if they might, in their human experience and their spirit form of what their expression is, maybe like my spirit expression might be really being like claiming my magical inheritance in this human form. So does that mean like me typing to like a plant from Mexico and Denmark, or is that like even too limiting, just within the blood lineage? I don't know. Those are just like philosophical rabbit holes that I can go down, and just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, when we think of the FES certification work and training, one of the assignments we have is to do an archetypal study. And in this archetypal study, we make a parallel between a plant and the soul signature and journey of an individual. And it can be any of the essence plants of the whole Bach repertory, as well as the FES for this particular assignment. So it's open to this whole range of plants, some of them that even grow in the desert, in the frontier of what now is Mexico, but is actually plants from many different ecosystems. And in fact, I don't think that they would they would see that there's a limit in terms of having to be one of the 12 from Dr. Bach. And if it wasn't for that certification specifically, you could choose from any other essences that you work with. So as far as the way I see identifying a type remedy, I'm open to all the plants and all the flowers. However, there are some that seem to be plants in service that are not so typically, referenceable as an archetype for someone to identify. Some plants seem to lend themselves very much to be used in so many different ways to be like heavy duty workers, and not so much plants that express these unique archetypes. But still, they could be, a type remedy for someone.
That's super helpful.
Yeah, the range is open to all the plants. And I've heard, for instance, Jane Bell talk about a person being a Northern Lady Slipper type, and that would be that very delicate, super sensitive individual who has a whole journey in coming into incarnation. With FES, we talk about people being a fawn lily type, for instance. And that's a very small flower that grows right and on the edge of the snow in the high altitudes where the snow is melting, and it has these flowers turned towards the ground with the petals turned up, with a yellow center and white petals, and then they turn kind of slightly mauve when they begin to fade. So it's, there's all these different archetypal expressions in the plant world. It's just so fascinating, and any of these plants can be a type remedy, which in my view can, even more than being the one that fixes us, be a remedy that helps us reveal our gifts.
And I'd love to just jump in, because I love what you brought up, Alexandria, about the ancestral connection and influence, and even yearning for that that connection with the ancestral plants, or the plants our ancestors would have interacted with. And it brings me back to the idea of plant allies. And so I look at that even more than thinking about, or I think about that more than I think about type to begin with, in knowing that we can have these allies that we really resonate with for whatever reason. It's just, I'm so drawn to a particular plant, and it may change, and there may be multiple plant allies. And I look at it like, if you think you might have, multiple spirit guides, I think there's multiple plant spirit guides that we can tap into, that that we have this, we can cultivate this relationship with, that we can I like to think about flower essences that way. And that when I work with clients, a lot of times there will be one that kind of pops up and calls louder and is really saying, I'm like volunteering to be an ally for this blend or for this person. And that might be the essence that I will continue to put in formulas, not because it's a personality type fit, but it just has this resonance that seems to be more as a guide, an ally, a helper that really makes sense and wants to be there for that person.
I love that. Thanks so much, Ro.
Please unmute, Ailey.
Thank you. It's Eliel. I want to be respectful of our time, but I also wanted to share that I got so excited when you, and I think it was Patsy, who talked about information and not vibration. I want to share that I'm studying with a woman, a Chinese woman who has her PhD in quantum physics, and I gifted her with the Flower Essence book. But one of the things that she's teaching is that everything and everyone is made up of a vibrational field that carries information, energy, and matter. So when she talks about information, she says everything carries it. And so to hear Julian mentioned that it's information that they carry got me very, very excited, because for me, the essence of healing is being able to change the contractive or impeding or blockage of what the scientifically would be called negative information into positive information, which is expansive and feels good. And I don't think people need really the definition of positive and negative. So I'm just over the moon with that. And I would love to find that particular book or lecture where Julian says that.
Yeah, it's called Patterns of Water.
Okay.
I believe. And he published, it's a book. Yeah.
And that's one of his that I
book.
don't have.
It's one of his books. Yeah, it's self-published, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Thank you so
Bach
much.
Flowers and the Patterning of Water or something
Right.
like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll check it out and find it for you. But yeah, Louie, we've been referring to this book, and unfortunately, it's not translated to English. We hope it will, especially around this whole thing of archetypal versus type remedy, right? And it's so interesting, the insights that he has had. I read it all, and I've been using it in the discussions on the deep dive that we're taking into the Bach remedies. Ricardo Orozco.
I'm sure there's a long list of things you need to translate, Loie, but we would really appreciate that. Thank you. Please jump on, Loie.
Go ahead, Loie.
Yeah, I just want to say I really appreciate, Ruth, that you have the language to share, as well as the outreach and the mission, because there's so much published in Spanish that is of such depth, because there's so many practitioners in Brazil and Spanish-speaking countries. And so I'm just, thank you for sharing what you've got. And yeah, it is so much work to translate a book. I proposed translating that book actually to the publisher who and who ended up publishing the translation of Pablo Noriega's book. And that was many years ago, and maybe we'll get there. It's a lot of work. Anybody else who wants to do the work, I can put you in contact.
Natalie, yeah. And Alexandria, who knows, somebody who has both languages, it will be great. Could be a joint project. And this book especially, there are some very, very rich contributions that he is giving around the topical use of essences, and it's just so rich, the experience, because then we can see these archetypal patterns at work in such a range of ways, right? I find it absolutely enriching and fascinating.
Well, this field is only 130 years old. I mean, it's a very young field, and there's so much to learn. And it's wonderful to have you as an emissary of the Spanish-speaking world, Loie, because because it's been so popular and developed, and people are working in the field, so much has come out of that. And we in the US here are just feeling like we just need to get more people into this, and that's our whole goal, is to bring this forward and to bring more people into the field and empower them to learn how to be practitioners, to learn to do this work, to learn to deepen and expand, and just make this what we know it is. And it's just more of us just need to be doing this. So it's really cool to have everybody here. And Ruth, if you could talk about a little bit about the practitioner training that's coming up, because we really want to encourage people, if this is the moment for you, like, yes, now.
Yeah, for anyone, there are several here whom I know have already taken that and are working on their cases and all of that. But we're going to begin in January 11 with the course actually opening on January 1st. Another journey of going deep into both observing the plants and reading the book of nature, as well as observing the archetypal journey of the soul and seeing the language of the soul and the language of the plants and their correlations in the practice of flower essence therapy. And this is the program that FES has structured, and that I really feel honored to be able to deliver with their very rich materials. And so for those who want to have this more structured approach as part of their training, and to add this whole range of other plants and this other approach, check it out. Yeah.
So we hope that everyone has been really enjoying this conversation. We are really looking forward to doing this again, and we would love to hear from you. What sort of topics do you think would be really interesting to have a group conversation around? You can email us, hello@floweressencestudies.com, reach out on any of the other options. But we're just so pleased that everyone showed up and that you're here and engaged and participating. And it's just, the chat, it's so great. Thanks everyone for being here. Ruth, do you have
Yeah, I do. That I would like to say this is chapter 1 of this conversation, specifically of type remedy, because I think we can have another iteration, a second and a third, that we can bring more even aspects of more in depth and examples perhaps of how a type remedy has been a companion for someone. And so stay alert, because there's more to come. And we're also really tuning in to what are the themes and the questions and the conversations that you would like to have as community, because this is conversation number 1 that we're having as a free call for all of us as a community. And so write to us, tell us what themes you're really wanting to have a conversation about in a group like this that we had today. So we want to hear from you.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
everyone.
much, everybody.
There you go. Thanks, everyone, for the generosity of being here, of sharing your ideas and your voices and your presence. It enriches us all and helps us bring flower essence therapy even more into the world. Thank you, everyone.